There you are. Thanks for joining me again. What we're going to be talking about in this little session is management. The last video in this series is something which talks about business. And here we are talking about the control of business. So I'm going to say to you that what we have is um, a series of definitions. I have no choice but to provide you. And the first one of those, if I share the screen and retreat to the corner of your device, let me do that for you. This is not necessarily a popular definition that you'll find in any kind of textbook, but I think it is a definition which works. I'm saying that a business is an arrangement of resources. Remember that. We're going to have to define what the resources are, but it's an arrangement of resources. You bring those resources together for an express purpose, an intention. That intention in business language is something we say is a vision and a mission and a strategy. Let me go back to the beginning. A business is an arrangement of resources brought together with the intention of doing something. What is the something that you do in a business? Well, if we're working with that definition, I'm going to say that the arrangement part is something which you can do by just being a guy like me, possibly selling coal, like this lump in my hand. We'd think of that as being a sole proprietorship. You can also have a collection of guys. A friend and myself can put together a partnership, and that partnership is something which is going to buy and sell coal. You can also make it much more formal than that. And if you gather money together, capital as we refer to it, you can start creating companies, distinct entities with identities which have a number. Um, the we if you collect money and people together, then you're able to establish a corporation, which can be a public or private thing. The organization being one thing, the arrangement of the resources, and I said I define these, is from a popular, what we refer to as the 5M model, or sometimes the 6M model. I'll leave you to go and look up what the sixth M might be. We talk about men, money, machines, materials, and methods. And clearly that's about labor. So you need people to do things. Think of a supermarket. You walk into ShopRite or Checkers or Pick n Pay, you see people, and they're serving you and they're filling the shelves, and they are selling to you because that's what the cashiers are doing. You need money because all of that has to be paid for. You need those tills. You need materials. And in a supermarket, you buy your materials from people who make them for you, and you then sell them as packaged goods or um, the fast moving consumer goods. And you need methods. Those methods are something to which we'll return in this module, because the methods are the ways you go about doing things. And those ways are what I would have to describe as being similar in many enterprises that are involved in doing the same thing. In other words, Spar and Checkers and Pick n Pay do the same thing. Woolworths does the same thing, but it does the same thing slightly differently. So the methods within supermarket retailing are pretty much the same. Woolworths, which is not a supermarket retailer, because they also sell you bedding and clothes, for example, and makeup, they the methods become slightly unique. And if you buy bread and milk at a shop attached to a forecourt of a fuel reseller, that method is not quite the same as you would see in Checkers or Spar or Woolworths, because it's something which is dependent upon the location of where the goods are being sold, and the motivation and impetus that people have for stopping off to buy their goods right there. Now, I'm going to add to that a little bit and point out that there are three sets we talk about here. There's public sector, private sector, and what I call there the third sector. The third sector is civil society. The point being that they all, there in the red overlap in the middle, are observing the same principles of management. So the third sector operates in service of humanity. The for-profit sector operates for profit, and the government or public sector looks to service the citizens of a particular republic like South Africa. The something that is arranged that I'm going to say can be divided up into classes of business activity. We look at primary activity and secondary activity and trade activity. To that, we have to add a fourth one, and the fourth one is going to be service activity. So any national jurisdiction like South Africa, for example, is something which is going to be characterized, can be illustrated by a volume of primary activity like farming and fishing and mining and forestry. There's going to be some manufacturing activity, and there's also going to be some secondary activity. I beg your pardon, alternative trade activity. That trade activity is where we sell the stuff that people make, and the stuff that people make comes from the stuff that we can either farm or chop down or get out of the ground. Service activity is what we have to do to keep it all together. And we're going to have to return to that because that is something unique. Now, it poses a bit of a question. Remember, I mentioned there were 8 billion people on the planet in the last short lesson on video, and we can't expect that they're not going to conflict with each other because nothing is guaranteed to work all the time without there being some sort of tension. So we regulate that, and regulation is about laws, and there are a range of laws. So we regulate contract. We say, if I intend selling to you, then you must have every intention of paying me for that, and vice versa. I must have every intention of delivering the goods to you. There are laws that regulate credit extension. When I say, you know what, you don't have to give me the money straight away, not required. If I'm going to sell to you on account, I'd like to have some sort of assurance that you are going to pay me and that there's a process that I can follow. If with the courts and the legal system, if you don't pay me. In other words, I'm allowed to recover my debt. There are regulations and laws with regard to association. So if I'm going to be a guy in business, I'm not associating with anyone. But if I'm going to be a guy in business with someone else, now there's a form of association, of interaction between us. And when you have many people interacting together, when there are thousands of people interacting as owners of a business, then we're going to have to regulate the way they interact with each other or associate with each other. There are contractual laws with regard to the way you employ people and the way you treat people. When they're employed by you, you have to give some money to the state, which does much of the regulatory activity and sets up the Department of Justice, for example, which has public prosecutors, which sets up court systems, and that's what taxes go to pay for. And you also have to regulate business behavior. In other words, the interaction of businesses and what you can do with respect to observing the sovereignty of other businesses that are trading in your particular trading space. I'm happy to say that we're at the point now where we can start talking about what managers are. So let's just get on with that. Now I'm going to get back into the corner of your screen again. So a manager is, in my definition, and you won't find this in a textbook either, but it's very simple and approachable. A manager is a person who is employed to make all that business stuff happen. All those laws, all that activity, the buying and the selling and the making and the servicing. Managers are employed specifically for the purpose of ensuring that that gets done. They're not necessarily doing the making. They're not necessarily doing the selling or the buying, but they're employed to ensure that that gets done. In other words, while managers are a resource, managers are managing men and materials and methods and money. Okay? Now, there's certain things that managers do. Managers pluck. They plan, they lead, they organize, and they control. I'll leave you to freeze this lesson and read that on your own. But the notion of managers plucking is not something with which Henry Mintzberg agrees, because Mintzberg maintains managers don't plan and lead and organize and control. You don't see a manager planning. You don't see them leading. You don't see them organizing. You don't see them controlling. And you don't see when one activity becomes another activity. Mintzberg simply maintains you you fulfill a role. And Mintzberg says there are three roles, and your roles are decisional. You make the decisions, and informational. You obtain information and you disseminate information. And there is an interpersonal role. In other words, the person who is respected as the leader of the organization or the leader of the tribe, if we go back 10,000 or just 1,000 years ago. An interpersonal role is one of being able to serve as a middle ground, as a liaison. And a decisional role is actually making things happen. The informational role is about ensuring that people have the necessary resources and information at their fingertips to be able to make the minor decisions they require, because every manager you see makes decisions. So you're able to extract from the prescribed text in your course or any other text or the internet an idea of what those roles are. And my recommendation is that you develop a very close familiarity with those, because you need to know this, and it needs to be pretty much second nature. So not only is there this table, I have this one for you, and I recommend you freeze and go through this and a further one. So Mintzberg aside, I'm going to say that all those activities, whether you consider to be planning and leading and organizing and controlling, or making decisions and collecting information and fulfilling an interpersonal role, you do that at a level in the organization. And the level of the organization, we talk about the people at the top as the C-suite, and that means that it's a chief executive officer, and as you have written there, the chief marketing officer, the chief financial officer, the chief information officer. They're the people who, as I like to say it, and this is not an advert for BMW, the chief people are the guys who drive the 7 Series BMWs. You have middle managers who are important, and they drive the 5 Series BMWs. And then you have low-level managers, and they drive the 3 Series BMWs. Or, if they're unlucky, Polos and vans. So if you are operating at a level in the organization, we have to say, what is each level of the organization about? So whether you're basing your learning solely on watching and listening to me speak, and or you're using a textbook, or you are using this lecture to prompt you to go and do further inquiry on the internet, for example, what we can tell you is that across the levels of the organization, remember I said these guys were like 7 Series BMW drivers, and these ones are 5 Series BMW drivers, and these ones in turn are 3 Series BMW drivers, or they drive the vans. You know what? They tend to manage different things. At the top of the organization, the top managers are required to think about what's going to happen in the future. They think about how to arrange the structure of the organization. Middle managers, on the other hand, are involved very heavily in all three, and very primarily in getting people to do the right sorts of things, becomes a very important part of the L or the L in PLOC. And lower level organization, down the organization hierarchy, the emphasis is mostly upon technical skills and attributes, and very little, as you can see from this, on conceptual ability. So, with this in mind, it becomes important to say, what do we mean by technical skills? What exactly is a technical skill or aptitude? And we say that a technical skill or expertise is something which is developed on the job. It starts off with a basic expertise which can be trained, but then it is reinforced in an applied environment. And when someone has done something for a long time and they're very good at making that work in practice, then it makes sense to have them monitor other people and groom other people. Conceptual skills is a different kettle of fish, and the more senior you are, the more crucial it is that you demonstrate conceptual skills. And remember, you should be freezing this to make notes of this if you want. And then the human or interpersonal managerial skills are just about being able to get people to do things. A summary of this is an easier thing to look at than all that detail. The summary says, that's the 3 skills sets you require, and you're going to be practicing those 3 skill sets across the organization. And what we're going to do is come back and say, if I'm talking about across the organization, what do I mean? I'll show you what I mean. I'm saying that organizations are something which, or things which are departmentalized. The people who sell are going to be here, but the people who make are going to be here. And that means we probably are going to have to come back to work out precisely what that means. I'll see you in the next lesson.